a new place, a new cultural landscape, a new political, a new way of being, a new way of knowing, a new longing, a new call, a new city, a new story.
Place of comfort. And life has a way of taking us out of our comfort zone. 12 years ago, after Hurricane Katrina, most in this city lost their homes to the federal flood of 2005, experiencing an extended stay far out of the zone of comfort. For many, that stay is permanent. For some, because they chose not to return. For others, because they could not afford to return. And for still others, because systems of oppression in government and private enterprise denied their return. Some families were denied their homes of many generations because they could not produce a paper title. Many learned that their homes, both detached houses and units in large housing projects, would be torn down and not rebuilt. Most who had this experience were Black. While the population of New Orleans has nearly reached its pre-flood level of 400,000, there are today 90,000 fewer Black residents. When I came to this city 4 years ago, I began to hear the stories of how that natural and human-made disaster affected the lives of people here I have come to love. The federal flood moved all in this city out of the zone of comfort. As the waters receded, they revealed submerged issues of justice, power, and faith, of oppressions and how they intersect with each other and impact our collective stewardship of the land and water we live on, of privileges and how they enable us to look away or to seize control. After the flood, those who were here recall the eerie, uncanny silence of the city. No engines, no lights, no birds, no children. The kind of silence that makes you listen. In the first few years, if your neighbor asked you for something, you said, yes, that's all. And for years after, on that day, August 29th, everyday conversations, even with strangers, stopped to include a few minutes of listening to each other's stories of where you were and where you went and who or what you lost and what happened next. Even today, it is not unusual for a survivor to share a storm story with a total stranger. Often, these last 4 years, that stranger has been me. This week, that stranger might be you. Outside the zone of comfort, there come invitations to learn, to stretch our awareness, our knowledge of ourselves and our neighbors, of privilege and oppression, of ourselves, of systemic injustice, and how oppressions intersect, and of how evil may be resisted through faith and power and justice. Outside the zone of comfort, New Orleans' 3 small Unitarian Universalist congregations ceased competing and learned to be in right relationship. And I have been blessed to learn from New Orleans Unitarian Universalists about how to lean into discomfort in order to stay in right relationship. I invite you to seek this blessing while you are here, for I assure you, we are offering it to you. I invite you to wonder with me, how do we get to that place of radical and holy discomfort without reenacting disaster? How do we awaken every day our capacity to look and look deeply, to listen and listen deeply? How do we connect head, heart, and hands in the service of faith and power and justice? At its founding, what is now First Unitarian Universalist Church of New Orleans was known as the Strangers' Church, and we have a tradition of greeting strangers as friends. Please turn now, look and listen and smile and greet your neighbors and take your neighbors by the hand.
Please rise as you are willing and able. Remaining hand in hand, join us in spirit and sing.
I Is home always somewhere over the rainbow, way up high? Perhaps in a foreign land, perhaps here. When my dad's parents, Henri and Lorraine, emigrated from Haiti in the 1970s, they were looking for a home that could offer them the opportunities that were always just beyond their reach in their native land. Haiti has been racked by centuries of oppression, embargo, ecological devastation, and dictatorship, neglect. My grandparents left the political and economic turmoil to start a new life in the United States, coming here as generations had before and after them. They recreated themselves and their children in New York City. They worked hard, they learned English, and they established a new home here in the United States. And in this process, they added their spices, language, colorful art, blood, sweat, and tears to the extravagant bounty of this country. Their children took various paths in this life. My generation, their grandchildren, went off in many more directions, including one special case who went on to become a Unitarian Universalist minister. And we're just beginning to learn what paths their great-grandchildren might take in this land. And along the ways, there have been some incredible success stories, some heroic turnarounds, college graduations, small businesses, fantastic travels across the globe. And we've had some spectacular failures and profound disappointments. Lives lost too soon to illness or violence, addiction, and broken relationships. Home has to be a container that is strong enough to hold us in the best of times and the worst. Where is home for the immigrant and their descendants? Home is where we are. I believe that my grandparents carried home with them in their hearts in pieces. And wherever they could come together as a family, bringing those pieces together, there was home. For me, home is where I am free to be me, free to hang my pictures up on the wall. It has a table for me to order my thoughts through writing. It has a place for me to laugh in my reckless way of laughing, and another place where I might cry when crying is the right thing to do. It's a place of love, truth-telling, and courage. I can't say that I've actually found that home just yet, but I've certainly seen glimpses of it. Unitarian Universalism has offered some tantalizing bits of home. It's done that for me over the years. And at other times, it's made me wonder. There's no place quite like home. And in a way, that notion makes me fearless as I seek it out. New Orleans is a great city, a city that has been home to people for countless generations. First to the indigenous peoples of this land, of the Americas, then the Spanish and French colonists, enslaved Africans, Haitian exiles, Vietnamese immigrants, second, third, and fourth generation Irish, Italian and Jewish Americans, even a good number of Unitarian Universalists of all kinds. My, people come and go so quickly here.
We come and go so quickly. We aren't always sure where we come from, where we are, or where we are going. Together, let's rise in body and or spirit to sing the words by Paul Gauguin, set to music by Brian Tate. We'll sing this 3 times, the first time all together, and the next 2 times as a round. Please follow the lead of your leaders. At the end, keep repeating mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?
Like most people, when I was a child, my parents and teachers taught me how important it is to always tell the truth. But sometimes telling the truth about ourselves isn't easy. In fact, it can be downright dangerous. When I was a young boy, yes, boy, I often used to pray to the God of my understanding, "Please, God, make me a girl." This was the truth about myself that I couldn't tell to anyone else for over 50 years. During those years, the life I was living was not as honest as I would have wanted. Perhaps if I had found a Unitarian Universalist community earlier, I would have been able to share my deepest truth before I did. Eventually, though, the truth refused to be hidden any longer, and I found the courage to share my pain with a few other people, and eventually the whole world. The process of claiming my truth was not a smooth one. It was really hard work. It was painful, and it came with a deep price. My transition led to rejection and sorrow, loss and grief. In the end, though, I discovered another secret that I had been carrying, a secret I didn't even know about myself. And that secret was my ability just to love and to share my love with strangers. The ability to share someone else's pain, to be a comforting presence for those whose voices need to be heard. These are some of the other gifts I didn't realize I had until after I felt the knives of prejudice, anger, and fear against my own bare skin. Until I realized that so many others, millions of others, bear the scars of such things from the earliest moments of their being, I wasn't able to love as fully as I do right now. During my difficult but joyful transition, I began to ask myself questions about our country and who I am. And it was during my gender transition that I finally discovered Unitarian Universalism. Within a few short years of becoming a Unitarian Universalist, I heeded an irresistible call to ministry. That call has opened up for me a door to telling not just my truth, but to sharing my truth and our truths with love and with compassion. Love and compassion for the listeners, irrespective of who they are or what they might believe or whether they might disagree with me. As Unitarian Universalists, we have many truths to tell. Truths about justice, liberty, equality, compassion, and human rights for every single person. Yet in the past couple of years, and especially more recently, during the unusual times in which we find ourselves now living, our shared truths as Unitarian Universalists appear to have been lost on those who do not share our vision of the world or our country. Our views on religion, our views on peace and justice and how to achieve it. These truths need to fall on fertile ground during times like these. Is it possible that our sadness that people don't agree with us is self-inflicted? Should we have paid more attention to those both within and outside Unitarian Universalism who did not then and do not now agree with the majority of Unitarian Universalists? Perhaps that's so, but for me, as I move forward, I've learned that the truth is simply not enough. I know that I must do more to include love and compassion with the truths that I believe in and as I share them. I'm proud to be a trans woman. I'm really happy in my skin, and I'm thrilled to be living out the journey of my faith. My faith in Unitarian Universalism's beliefs and principles has never, ever been stronger than it is today. Just using a public restroom is one example for me of an act of faith that the God of my understanding loves me. And in that faith, I can find the courage to love back. With love and compassion comes the courage to resist injustice.
Unitarian Universalist Musicians Network member Scott Rowe has written this beautiful song, Resist, to accompany our call for compassion in the face of injustice. Will you join us in singing, please?
Though we tremble before uncertain futures, may we meet illness, death, and adversity with strength. May we dance in the face of our fears, writes trailblazer Gloria Andalsua, who knew a thing or two about courage. Courage requires both vulnerability and careful strategy. I am not unlike other people of color in mostly white company in that I don't often show my full self. I'm guarded, not inauthentic, because the me that is learned to navigate mostly white spaces definitely is part of me. It just isn't my whole self. To bring my full self certainly would mean risking being misunderstood, but more than that, I would risk inviting even more harmful words and behaviors into my day. Each day is an ever exhausting dance of negotiating each interaction and conversation. How much of me do I allow this person or group to see? How much of that decision is about risking vulnerability, and how much is about self-preservation? Hundreds of times a day, I must ask myself, who benefits from this risk more? This time, does stepping out into the unknown or withholding my full self simply serve to alleviate the discomfort of another? Or does it bring me closer to true freedom? Courage is not demanding safety when confronting annoyance of having one's haughty and long-held answers questioned. It is incompatible with despair. Courage is not becoming defensive or insisting on being viewed as an individual when the privileges of membership in a dominant group are brought to light. Rather, courage recognizes that growth insists on a willingness to be utterly transformed. Courage is not believing that anyone is quote-unquote helping or coming to the quote-unquote assistance of members of marginalized groups. Rather, it is recognizing that the need to play savior comes from the societal brainwashing caused by systems that convince some they are superior over others. Courage is seeking one's own liberation from these lies, knowing it will require a relinquishment of power and an admittance that they've been bamboozled. Courage does not require perfection from us, or airtight plans, or even expertise. But I'll tell you what courage does require. Courage requires taking great risks while stepping into the unknown. It takes no courage to shut one's mouth, step aside, and listen when needed. The only thing at risk here is one's ego and a self-identity built around this myth of superiority. Courage does not ask us to stop trembling. It asks us to find ways to incorporate our trembles into our dance. Courage, the faithful companion of hope, keeps us going, traveling into the unknown, knowing that both smooth sailing and rough waters are ahead. Courage is sticking around when the quote we and the quote us are spoken in contexts that clearly don't mean me. Courage is claiming this faith as home when nearly everything around me says that I'm out of place. Yet everything inside me says I am at home. Courage is the generations and generations of ancestors who taught us to actively pursue joy, laughter, celebration alongside our outrage, grief, and fatigue. The goddess Tonantzin, Madre de los Mexicos, bringer of corn, Nuestra Morenita, teaches that we can make for ourselves a place of comfort and leave room for wonder, even when our home has been invaded and has become nearly unrecognizable. Courage is being firm and saying, I know exactly where home is and what it looks like. I will figure out any way to get there with the help of good friends. We will dance the whole way there through the terrifying unknown. I will brave the rough waters, knowing that my boat may be small, but it is so strong, I'll leave a trail of beauty in my wake so that other courageous seekers who follow will not be lonely on their journeys, because despite all, this river in my soul will not let me forget that I am somebody.
Bravo.
Let us rise and join in the journey of courage as we sing Faya Rose Touré's soul-filled song.
It took a river of ancestors to bring us here together today, gathering on the banks of the Mississippi River.
A river that represents bondage as well as liberation.
A river that symbolizes wealth of spirit and of faith.
A river that is both cataclysmic and yet can bring healing balm to the soul.
A river that is a manifestation of the blood that runs through all of our veins.
A river that serves as a conduit of diverse culture and religion that force us to accept, embrace, and even love difference.
A river of ancestors who offered us gifts of courage and heart, compassion and hope, have brought us to this place and this time together.
A river that has so many stories to tell.
We have heard 4 stories out of thousands, stories of us, stories of understanding, love, courage, and home. And there are so many more stories to tell.
Let us resist any narrative that tells us we are alone, that any one of us has pulled ourselves up all by ourselves.
Outside of community,
outside of systems,
outside of history,
we rest on the shoulders of many ancestors.
We rejoice in our interdependent web of existence across space and time. We rejoice and we honor our ancestors, those who have died, passed away into the mystery, who opened the way for us to be who we are and how we are. For the ancestors who showed us love, who chose to live and lead with courage, whose lives made our own in their stories, their blood, and their wisdom.
We rejoice and honor the ancestors that whisper in our ears lovingly, daily, and who strongly demand justice. We give thanks.
Beloveds, at this time, we invite you to think of the ancestors who co-created you. Let us take a deep breath together, in and out. And again.
And again.
Earlier, we poured libation to honor those who have come before us. We invite you to continue to fill this room with their names, with their stories, and with our gratitude.
We give thanks.
We give thanks. And the people say,
we give thanks.
That's good.
Mine's up here.
Mm-hmm.
I love our people. Dear friends. Oh, that laughter. Laughter. We invite you to take a collective laugh. Thank you, Loretta, for this one. And a deep collective breath. Settle gently into the place where you are. Allow your heart to soften into this moment. We breathe in and out together, exchanging sacred breath with the trees and the river and the bayous and with each other. We have come together with broken hearts and broken promises. We have come together to revisit, restore, renew, recreate the covenant that binds together this faithful body. We have come together to take a faithful assessment of how power is arranged within our hearts, our congregations, our association, our institutions, our governments, our societies. Friends, we have come together for some spiritual fortification.
We breathe in and out together, exchanging sacred breath with the trees and the river and the bayous and with each other. We may not always know what or where home is or how to be there, but we give thanks in this moment that we are not alone. We are held in a vast web of love and co-creation, and we are worthy now. We are enough. Revelation is ever unfolding, and we have the courage, the heart, and compassion to live into what is wanting to be born of us the promise of beloved community. We breathe in and out together.
And we
Ashe, ashe,
Ashe,
and amen.
amen.
Thank you.
In this time and in this place, we invite forward our precious leaders to light the chalice in the power of grace.
And with this flame, we say, welcome to Nolens. We send you off this evening with this song written by Rabbi Shoshana Meira Friedman, first sung at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., to lift up Pope Francis' call to action on climate change. The tide is rising, and so are we. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able and join me in singing, "The tide is rising."
The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The task is mine. Amen.